The stars looked different through Vexian eyes. Commander Kilthera stood on the bridge of his warship, watching the blue planet grow larger on the main screen. His forearms moved across the control panels with practiced ease. Behind him, 40 other ships waited for his orders. This was supposed to be easy. The Vexians had done this 47 times before. They would arrive at a new world, show their power, and the local species would surrender. Then they would take what they wanted and move on to the next system. Sol 3, the third planet from this yellow star, looked like all the others. Green and blue with white clouds. The scan showed cities and technology, but nothing that worried Kilthera. These humans seemed to be at the same level as most species when the Vexians first found them. "Commander," his weapons officer spoke. "Should we begin the standard approach?" Kilthera nodded. The standard approach always worked. First, they would position their ships where the locals could see them. Then they would send a message demanding surrender. After that, they would wait for the inevitable response of fear and submission. But on Earth, things were different. Lieutenant Commander Hyunwoo Park sat in front of his screens at the Seoul Defense Station. The night shift was usually quiet. But tonight the sensors were showing something impossible. 41 objects had appeared at the edge of the solar system. They were big, much bigger than any human ship. Hyunwoo checked his readings 3 times before he believed them. The objects were moving toward Earth, and they were clearly artificial. He reached for the emergency communication button with a shaking hand. "This is Seoul Defense to Earth Command," he said into his microphone. "We have multiple unknown contacts approaching from deep space. Request immediate priority response." The response came back in seconds. "Seoul Defense, this is Admiral Tae-jun Choi. Confirm your readings and send all data immediately." Hyunwoo sent the sensor data and waited. His heart was beating fast. In all his years of watching the stars, he had never seen anything like this. Were they really alone in the universe? Apparently not. Captain So-young Kim was eating dinner when the alert came through. She dropped her chopsticks and ran to the bridge of her ship, the UES Defender. Her tactical officer, Dongmin Lee, was already at his station pulling up the sensor data. "Captain," Dongmin said without looking up, "these ships are using technology we don't understand. Their energy signatures are off the charts." So-young looked at the data on her screen. The alien ships were huge, at least 3 times larger than Earth's biggest warships. But more importantly, they were moving in formation. This wasn't exploration. This looked like an invasion fleet. "Get me Admiral Choi," she ordered, "and wake up the crew. I want us ready for anything." The communication came through quickly. Admiral Choi's face appeared on the main screen, looking tired but alert. "Captain Kim, I'm putting you in charge of our first response team. Take your squadron and move to intercept position near Jupiter." So-young felt her stomach drop. Her squadron consisted of 6 ships, Earth's newest and best. But against 41 alien vessels, they would be massively outnumbered. "Sir," she said carefully, "are we really going to engage unknown aliens with just 6 ships?" The admiral's expression was serious. "Captain, those ships are heading straight for Earth. We don't know their intentions, but we have to assume the worst. Your job is to make contact and buy us time to prepare our defenses." On the Vexian flagship, Kilthera was reviewing the sensor data about the human fleet. 6 small ships were moving to intercept them. He almost laughed. 6 ships against 41. These humans were either very brave or very stupid. "Commander," his communications officer spoke, "we are receiving a transmission from the humans." "Put it on the main screen," Kilthera ordered. He was curious to see what these creatures looked like. The screen flickered and showed the face of a human male in what appeared to be a military uniform. The human had dark hair and serious eyes. When he spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "This is Admiral Tae-jun Choi of Earth Defense Command. You have entered our solar system without permission or warning. State your intentions immediately or withdraw from our space." Kilthera stared at the screen for a moment. In 47 previous encounters, no species had ever demanded that the Vexians leave. They usually begged for mercy or offered tribute. This was new. He activated the communication system. When his image appeared on the human screen, he could see the surprise in their eyes. Vexians were tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms. Most species found them frightening. "I am Commander Kilthera of the Vexian Empire," he said in the human language which his computers had already translated. "You will surrender your world immediately. Resistance will result in the destruction of your cities and the death of your population." The human admiral showed no fear. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. "Commander Kilthera, I don't think you understand. This is our home. We will defend it with everything we have. I suggest you reconsider your position." Kilthera was genuinely surprised. He had expected terror, pleading, maybe even anger. But this calm defiance was something he had never encountered before. "Your 6 ships against our 41, Kilthera replied. "Your weapons against our shields. Your primitive technology against our advanced systems. How do you expect to win?" Admiral Choi smiled slightly, and something in that expression made Kilthera uncomfortable. "Commander," the human said, "I don't think you understand what humans are capable of when someone threatens our home. But you're about to find out." The communication ended, leaving Kilthera staring at a blank screen. For the first time in many years, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Uncertainty. His weapons officer looked at him expectantly. "Commander, should we begin the attack?" Kilthera looked out at the 6 human ships that were now moving into position between his fleet and the blue planet. They looked so small compared to his massive warships. But something about the admiral's confidence bothered him. "Prepare for battle," he ordered. "But be ready for anything. These humans might be different from what we expect." As the 2 fleets faced each other in the cold darkness of space, neither side fully understood what they were about to begin. The Vexians saw another easy conquest. The humans saw an enemy threatening everything they held dear. But Kilthera was already starting to realize that this encounter would be unlike any other in Vexian history. There was something in the human admiral's eyes that spoke of a determination he had never seen before. The battle for Earth was about to begin, and fear was about to take a new form. The first shots of the war were fired near Jupiter's massive red storm. Captain So-Young Kim watched from the bridge of the UES Defender as the Vexian fleet moved into their standard battle formation. 41 alien ships arranged themselves in a perfect diamond pattern, just like they had done in 47 other star systems. But this time would be different. "Captain," Tactical Officer Dongmin Lee called out, "The aliens are charging their weapons. Energy readings are climbing fast." So-Young nodded. She had studied every piece of data they had about the Vexian ships during the 3-hour journey from Earth to Jupiter. The aliens had powerful plasma cannons and energy shields that could stop most conventional weapons. In a straight fight, Earth's 6 ships wouldn't last 10 minutes. "Good thing we're not planning a straight fight," she said quietly. On the Vexian flagship, Commander Kilthera observed the human formation with mild interest. The 6 Earth ships had spread out in what looked like a random pattern. There was no tactical logic to their positions. It was almost as if they were trying to make themselves easier targets. "These humans know nothing about proper warfare," his weapons officer commented. "Should we destroy them quickly and move on to the planet?" Kilthera was about to agree when something caught his attention. One of the human ships, smaller than the others, was moving in an unusual pattern. It was weaving between the larger vessels, almost like it was dancing. "What is that small ship doing?" he asked. His sensor officer checked the readings. "It appears to be. I'm not sure, Commander. The movements seem random." But Lieutenant Min-Ha Shin knew exactly what she was doing. Her fighter craft, the Soul, Arrow, was running a sensor sweep that no alien computer would recognize. She was mapping the electromagnetic signatures of every Vexian ship, looking for patterns in their shield frequencies. "Come on," she whispered to herself as data flowed across her screen. "Every shield has a weakness. Every system has a flaw." Behind her, engineer Jae-Hun Yoon was working frantically in the Discovery's engine room. The Discovery was Earth's newest research vessel, rushed into service just days ago. Jae-Hun had been analyzing the alien technology signatures since they first appeared on sensors. "Captain Park," He called to his ship's commander over the communication system. "I think I've found something. The Vexian shields pulse at regular intervals. There's a split second when they're vulnerable." Captain Daeho Park, commanding the Discovery, felt his heart race. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 2 seconds every 30 seconds, Jae-hun replied. "And we'll need perfect timing." Meanwhile, So Young was coordinating with her squadron through encrypted channels. "All ships, remember the plan. We're not trying to win this battle. We're trying to learn how to win the war." The Vexians opened fire first. Brilliant beams of plasma energy lanced through space toward the human ships. The display was impressive, designed to terrify enemies into immediate surrender. Instead, the human ships scattered in all directions. Kilthara watched in confusion as the Earth vessels moved in patterns that made no tactical sense. Instead of forming defensive lines or attempting coordinated attacks, they were flying seemingly random courses around his fleet. "What are they doing?" he demanded. One of the plasma beams struck the UES Busan, a heavy cruiser commanded by Captain Young Soo-han. The ship's armor buckled and burned, but it didn't explode. Instead, it continued flying, trailing debris and emergency signals. "Damage report," So Young called over the communication channel. "We're hurt but not out," Captain Han replied, his voice tight with pain. "Hull breach on decks 4 and 5, but we can still fight." What Kilthara didn't understand was that the human ships were designed to take damage and keep fighting. While Vexian vessels relied on shields and avoided taking hits entirely, human engineers had built their ships to survive and adapt to battle damage. Lieutenant Min-ha completed her sensor sweep and transmitted the data to all human ships. "I've got their shield frequencies," she announced. "Transmitting firing solutions now." The Vexians were preparing for their second volley when something unexpected happened. The damaged human cruiser suddenly accelerated directly toward the Vexian formation, not away from it. "Are they insane?" Kilthara's weapons officer asked. "That ship is heavily damaged. It should be retreating." But Captain Han had a different plan. As his ship raced toward the alien fleet, Engineer Jae-hun's timing calculations flowed to his weapons officer. The Busan's main guns, primitive kinetic, weapons compared to Vexian plasma technology, fired at the exact moment when the enemy shields fluctuated. The metal projectiles moving at tremendous speed punched through the brief gap in the Vexian shields and struck the hull of an alien destroyer. The impact sent shockwaves through the Vexian formation. "Impossible," Kilthara breathed. "Our shields don't fail." His sensor officer's voice was shaky. "Commander, they somehow timed their attack to coincide with our shield rotation cycle. They found the vulnerability window." For the first time in 47 campaigns, a Vexian ship had taken hull damage in the opening engagement. The battle continued with increasing chaos. The human ships refused to follow any recognizable tactical doctrine. They used Jupiter's gravity well to slingshot themselves into attack positions. They hid behind asteroids and emerged to fire at unexpected angles. When their weapons weren't powerful enough to penetrate Vexian defenses, they improvised. Captain So Young ordered her ship to ram a Vexian frigate that had been damaged by the Busan's earlier attack. The defender's reinforced bow punched through the alien ship's weakened hull, causing it to explode in a brilliant flash. "What kind of warfare is this?" Kilthara demanded as he watched a second Vexian ship die. His forces still vastly outnumbered the humans, but they were taking losses that should have been impossible. Dr. Chang-Soo Ryu, monitoring the battle from Earth's command center, was recording everything. As a military psychologist, he was fascinated by the alien response patterns. The Vexian communications were becoming more frantic with each passing minute. "They're not used to enemies who fight back effectively," he told Admiral Choi. "Their entire tactical system is based on overwhelming technological superiority. They've never had to adapt to an opponent who could hurt them." The tide of battle shifted again when the Discovery used a new tactic. Engineer Jae-hun had modified their engines to produce massive electromagnetic pulses. When they detonated the pulse near 3 Vexian ships, the alien vessel's computers crashed simultaneously. "Their systems aren't hardened against EMP attacks," Jae-hun reported excitedly. "They've never needed to be." Commander Kilthara watched 3 of his ships drift helplessly as their crews worked to restart critical systems. This was becoming a nightmare. The humans were using tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They turned their weaknesses into weapons and found vulnerabilities that shouldn't exist. But what disturbed him most was their behavior when faced with certain death. Instead of surrendering or retreating, the human crews fought harder. The more desperate their situation became, the more dangerous they seemed to be. As the battle raged on, Kilthara realized something that chilled his alien blood. These humans weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to learn. Every attack they made, successful or failed, taught them something new about Vexian technology and tactics, and they were learning very, very quickly. 3 days after the first battle, Specialist Boram Han worked in what used to be a civilian research facility on Earth's moon. Now it was humanity's most important weapons laboratory. Around her, dozens of engineers and scientists studied pieces of destroyed Vexian ships that had been recovered from the Jupiter battlefield. "Look at this," she called to her team leader. "The aliens use a completely different metal alloy than anything we've ever seen. But watch what happens when I heat it to exactly 1,147 degrees. She applied the heat carefully. The alien metal, which had seemed nearly indestructible, suddenly became brittle and cracked apart. "Every material has a breaking point," Boram said with satisfaction. "Now we know theirs." Her discovery was immediately transmitted to every human ship and weapons facility in the solar system. Within hours, Earth's factories were modifying their ammunition to include heating elements designed to exploit this weakness. But the humans weren't the only ones adapting. Commander Kilthara stood in his ship's strategy room, reviewing battle reports with his senior officers. The loss of 5 ships at Jupiter had shocked the Vexian High Command. They were sending reinforcements, but they were also asking difficult questions. How did a primitive species destroy 5 of our vessels? His communications officer read from the latest message from Vexian Command. Kilthara didn't have a good answer. The humans fought like no enemy the Vexians had ever encountered. They seemed to treat their own ships as expendable weapons, using ramming attacks and suicide runs that made no tactical sense. "Sir," his weapons officer spoke up, "our reinforcements have arrived." Through the main view screen, Kilthara watched 20 more Vexian warships take position with his fleet. Now he had 56 ships against whatever forces Earth could assemble. Surely the numbers would be enough. Admiral Sung Ho Kwok commanded the human fleet from his flagship, the UES Seoul. He had 30 ships under his command, including the survivors from the Jupiter battle, and new vessels rushed out of Earth's shipyards. The numbers still favored the aliens, but the admiral wasn't worried about numbers anymore. "Commander Nam," he said to his second-in-command, Hyejin Nam, "what's the status on our new weapons?" Commander Nam checked her reports. "All ships are equipped with the new heated rounds that Specialist Han developed. We also have the EMP torpedoes that Engineer Yoon designed, and Captain Cha's stealth modifications are ready for testing." Captain Woo Jin Cha commanded a ship that looked nothing like the others in the human fleet. The Phantom had been a cargo freighter until Earth's engineers completely rebuilt it. Now it was invisible to most sensors and carried a surprise that the Vexians would never expect. The second major battle began near Mars. This time the Vexians approached more carefully. They had learned from their mistakes at Jupiter and deployed their ships in a more defensive formation. "They're being cautious now," Admiral Kwok observed. "Good. Caution is the beginning of fear." The Vexian attack began with a massive bombardment designed to overwhelm the human defenses quickly. Plasma beams filled space between the two fleets, creating a wall of deadly energy. But the human ships didn't try to avoid the bombardment. Instead, they flew directly into it. Kilthara watched in amazement as human vessels took devastating damage but continued fighting. Their armor was melting. Their hull sections were exploding, but still they kept firing back. "What's wrong with these creatures?" his sensor officer asked. "Why don't they retreat when they're clearly outmatched?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Navigator Siri Jang aboard the human destroyer Incheon had calculated a hyperspace jump that no sane pilot would attempt. Her ship, heavily damaged and losing life support, suddenly vanished from normal space. "Where did it go?" Kilthara demanded. Seconds later, the Inchin reappeared directly inside the Vexian formation, materializing between two alien cruisers. The human ship was dying, but Siri had saved enough power for one final action. The Inchin's reactor went critical, destroying itself and severely damaging both Vexian ships. "They're using their own deaths as weapons," Kilthera's weapons officer said, his voice filled with horror. But the real surprise was yet to come. While the Vexians were focused on the main battle, the Phantom approached their command ship undetected. Captain Cha's stealth technology worked perfectly, making his ship invisible to alien sensors. The Phantom looked like a damaged freighter drifting in space. When Vexian salvage teams brought it aboard their ship, they had no idea they were loading a Trojan horse filled with human marines. Major Inhosong led 24 soldiers through the alien ship's corridors. The fighting was brutal and close. Human weapons were primitive compared to Vexian technology, but in the narrow passages of a spaceship, primitive could be very effective. "Remember," Song told his men over their communication system, "we're not here to hold territory. We're here to learn everything we can about how their ships work." The Marines fought their way to the ship's computer core, while the space battle raged outside. Every piece of information they gathered was transmitted back to Earth before the Vexian security forces could stop them. The boarding action shocked every Vexian who witnessed it. No civilized species fought hand-to-hand combat inside spaceships. It was barbaric, brutal, and terrifyingly effective. Commander Kilthara received reports of human soldiers fighting in his ship's corridors with a mixture of disbelief and growing dread. These humans weren't just tactically unpredictable. They were willing to fight in ways that civilized species had abandoned thousands of years ago. "Sir," his communications officer called, "the boarding party has been eliminated, but they transmitted significant amounts of classified data before we stopped them." Kilthara felt something he had never experienced in 47 previous campaigns. These humans weren't just defending their world. They were studying his forces, learning his weaknesses, and adapting faster than his own military could respond. The Seoul battle ended with heavy losses on both sides, but the strategic situation had changed completely. The humans now had detailed information about Vexian ship designs, weapon systems, and tactical protocols. Dr. Chang-Su Ryu analyzed the intercepted alien communications from his office on Earth. What he found disturbed him in a way that surprised even himself. "Admiral Choi," he reported, "the Vexian stress indicators are off the charts. They're starting to show signs of what we would call combat fatigue. But more importantly, they're beginning to fear us." Admiral Choi looked at the psychological analysis. Reports. "Fear? They still outnumber us almost 2-to-1. Numbers don't matter if you're afraid to use them effectively," Dr. Ryu replied. "And sir, they're requesting reinforcements again. Not because they need more ships, but because their crews are developing what can only be described as combat anxiety." For the first time since the war began, Admiral Choi smiled. The Vexians were learning what it meant to fight an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. And they were discovering that sometimes the most terrifying opponent is the one who has nothing left to lose. The nightmares began after the battle at Mars. Commander Kilthara found himself waking in his quarters, his gray skin covered in cold sweat. In his dreams, human ships appeared from nowhere, their crews fighting with a determination that defied all logic. He was not alone. Throughout the Vexian fleet, similar reports were coming in. Soldiers who had conquered 47 worlds without hesitation were now requesting transfers away from the Sol system. Medical officers reported an epidemic of what could only be called anxiety disorders. "Sir," his communications officer approached carefully, "we have another request for transfer to a different sector." Kilthara looked at the report. It was from one of his best ship commanders, a veteran of 20 campaigns. The reason given was inability to adapt to irregular warfare conditions. "Denied," Kilthara said firmly. "We cannot show weakness to the high command." But privately, he understood the request. These humans fought in ways that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They turned their weaknesses into strengths and used their own deaths as tactical weapons. It was impossible to predict what they would do next. On Earth, Major Inho Song was training a new group of Marines for boarding operations. The intelligence gathered from the Vexian command ship had revealed critical information about alien ship designs and crew locations. "Listen, carefully," he told the soldiers. "Vexians have forearms, but they're not used to close combat. Their weapons are designed for long-range fighting in open space. In the narrow corridors of their ships, we have the advantage." The Marines practiced fighting in mock-ups of alien vessel interiors. They learned to use the Vexians' own ship designs against them, turning engineering spaces into death traps and using the aliens' unfamiliarity with hand-to-hand combat as a weapon. "Remember," Song emphasized, "we're not just fighting for territory. Every time we board one of their ships, we're teaching them that nowhere is safe. Fear is our greatest weapon." Communications officer Ye Jin Bae worked in a facility deep beneath the Korean mountains, intercepting and analyzing Vexian military transmissions. What she was discovering painted a picture that amazed Earth's military leadership. "Admiral Choi," she reported during the daily intelligence briefing, "the aliens are changing their entire military doctrine because of us. They're implementing new protocols, changing their formation patterns, and requesting specialized equipment." Admiral Choi studied the translation of intercepted messages. The Vexians were describing humans using terms that roughly translated to void-touched, death-sworn, and logic-defying. "They don't understand us," he realized. "To them, we're not just another enemy. We're something outside their comprehension." The psychological warfare was working better than anyone had planned. The Vexians had built their military around the idea of overwhelming technological superiority leading to quick surrenders. They had never faced an enemy that grew stronger with each engagement. Dr. Chang-Soo Ryu presented his latest analysis to the Earth Defense Council. "The Vexian military structure is based on predictable outcomes," he explained. "They fight calculated wars with predetermined objectives, but humans fight total wars with impossible objectives." "What do you mean by impossible objectives?" asked Defense Minister Park Kyung-min. "We're fighting for our existence," Dr. Ryu replied. "That means we'll use any tactic, take any risk, and make any sacrifice necessary to win. The Vexians can't calculate against that because it's mathematically irrational." Meanwhile, the Vexian High Command was having their own discussions. Commander Kilthera received a priority transmission from the Empire's military headquarters. "Commander?" The Supreme Marshal's image appeared on his screen. "Explain how a primitive species has destroyed 18 of our vessels in 3 engagements." Kilthera chose his words carefully. "Sir, these humans don't fight like other species. They use unpredictable tactics and seem willing to accept any level of casualties to achieve their objectives." "Are you telling me that our forces are afraid of primitives?" the Supreme Marshal demanded. "No, sir," Kilthera lied. "But I am requesting that we reconsider our approach to this system." The truth was more complex. His forces weren't afraid of human technology or numbers. They were afraid of human unpredictability. Every tactical manual the Vexians possessed assumed that enemies would behave rationally, seeking to minimize their losses while maximizing their gains. Humans didn't follow those rules. Captain So-Young Kim, now commanding a new ship after the Defender was destroyed at Mars, led a patrol near the asteroid belt. Her tactical officer reported Vexian ships in the area, but they were behaving strangely. "They're maintaining maximum distance," Dong-Min Lee observed. 3 ships against R1, but they won't close to effective weapons range. So-Young smiled grimly. "They're afraid of us getting close. They know that if we can reach boarding range, we'll find a way to hurt them." She was right. The Vexian ships were following new protocols that emphasized maintaining distance from human vessels at all costs. The aliens had learned that humans fought most effectively at close range, so they were trying to keep the battles at long distance. But humans adapted to that too. Engineer Jae-Hun Yoon had developed new missile systems that could track Vexian ships across vast distances. When the aliens tried to fight from far away, human weapons followed them. The psychological pressure was becoming unbearable for many Vexian crews. They were dealing with an enemy that refused to behave according to any logical military doctrine. Humans used damaged ships as weapons, turned their own weaknesses into advantages, and fought hardest when their situation was most hopeless. Kilthera reviewed the latest casualty reports. His fleet had lost 31 ships since arriving in the Sol system. The humans had lost more, but their losses seemed to make them fight harder rather than weakening their resolve. "Sir," his medical officer reported, "I have 17 more requests for psychological evaluation. The crews are showing signs of chronic stress and combat fatigue. For the first time in Vexian military history, an invasion force was developing what could only be called post-traumatic stress disorder before the campaign was even finished." The breaking point came during a minor skirmish near Venus. A single, human destroyer, badly damaged and clearly outnumbered, refused to surrender when surrounded by 5 Vexian ships. Instead, it accelerated toward the largest alien vessel. The Vexian commander, expecting a ramming attack, ordered his ship to move out of the way. But the human destroyer suddenly changed course and rammed a different ship instead. The surprise attack destroyed both vessels in a massive explosion. They can't even be predicted when they're trying to kill themselves, the Vexian commander reported to Kilthera. "How do we fight an enemy like that?" Kilthera didn't have an answer. For the first time in his military career, he was facing an opponent that seemed to grow more dangerous as the situation became more desperate. That night, alone in his quarters, he made a decision that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. He began composing a message to the High Command, requesting permission to withdraw from the Sol system. The Predators were learning what it felt like to be prey. The response from Vexian High Command was swift and brutal. Commander Kilthera's request for withdrawal was denied, and worse, a full battle fleet was being dispatched to Sol system. The message was clear: failure was not acceptable. 120 additional ships are en route, his communications officer reported. The High Command is also sending the planet killer weapon Void Render. Kilthera felt his 4 hearts sink. The Void Render was a massive weapon platform capable of cracking a planet's crust with a single shot. The High Command wasn't just trying to defeat humanity anymore, they were planning to eliminate the entire species. On Earth, Sub-Commander Ji-Hoon No worked frantically in the intelligence center, analyzing long-range sensor data. What he discovered made his blood run cold. "Admiral Choi," he called over the emergency communication system. "We have a problem. The aliens are bringing something big." Intelligence analyst Soo Jin Park ran the calculations 3 times before she believed them. "Sir, the energy signatures we're detecting suggest a weapon capable of planetary destruction. If those readings are accurate, they could destroy Earth with a single attack." Admiral Choi stared at the data on his screen. The approaching Vexian fleet was massive, but more importantly, it carried the means to end the war in the most final way possible. "How long do we have?" he asked. 6 days until they reach optimal firing position," Ji-Hoon replied. Admiral Choi made the hardest decision of his military career. He activated the fleet-wide emergency channel and sent a message to every human ship, base, and station in the solar system. "All forces, this is Admiral Choi. The enemy is bringing planet-killer weapons to destroy Earth. I am authorizing Protocol Omega. All ships are to engage the enemy with maximum force and no regard for survival. We are no longer fighting to win. We are fighting to ensure that if humanity dies, we take as many of them with us as possible." The response was immediate and chilling. Throughout the human fleet, crews began preparing for what they knew would be their final battle. Fleet Admiral Kyung Ho Yu took command of the combined Earth forces from his flagship, the UES Baekdu. He looked out at the 63 human ships that represented everything Earth could put into space, against 177 Vexian vessels, including the planet-killer weapon. "All ships," he broadcast. "We all know what we're facing. Our families are behind us and extinction is ahead of us. But remember this. We've taught these aliens what fear looks like. Now let's teach them what death looks like." The final preparation began with a tactic that no military strategist had ever considered before. Human ships began removing their safety systems, overcharging their reactors, and converting every possible system into a weapon. Pilot Yoon-ji Lim prepared her fighter squadron for what everyone knew would be a one-way mission. Her ships had been modified to carry fusion bombs instead of normal weapons. The plan was simple and terrifying. Get close to the Vexian planet killer weapon and detonate the bombs manually. Squadron leader to all pilots, she broadcast. We're not coming back from this one, but our children will remember what we did here. Her final transmission would be remembered forever. If we're going extinct, we're taking you with us. Dr. Tae-Young-oh worked in the most secret laboratory on Earth, developing humanity's last desperate weapon. For months, he had been studying the quantum mechanics of human unpredictability, trying to understand why Vexian computers couldn't predict human tactics. The answer is here, he told his research team. Human consciousness operates on quantum levels that create genuine randomness. We can weaponize our own unpredictability. The result was a system that made human ships exist in multiple probable locations simultaneously. Vexian targeting computers couldn't lock onto something that wasn't entirely real. Commander Kilthera watched the approaching human fleet with a mixture of admiration and horror. The Earth ships were flying in formation towards certain death, and every alien who saw them knew they would fight to the last vessel. Sir, his tactical officer reported, the humans are not attempting to retreat to the outer system. They're coming directly at us. I know, Kilthera replied quietly. They're going to die fighting. The battle began at the edge of Earth's orbit. Human ships, outnumbered almost 3-1, flew directly into the Vexian formation with no regard for survival. Some ships had removed their life support systems to make room for more weapons. Others had replaced their engines with explosives. Captain Sang-Wook Kim coordinated Earth's planetary defenses while the space battle raged overhead. Every missile battery, every laser cannon, and every defensive platform was firing at maximum rate. The planet's surface looked like it was covered in shooting stars. All defense stations, he broadcast, give them everything we have. Make every shot count. But the real shock came when Dr. O's quantum warfare system activated. Human ships suddenly began appearing and disappearing randomly across the battlefield. Vexian weapons couldn't target something that existed in probability rather than reality. What is happening? Kilthera demanded as his ships fired at empty space while human vessels materialized behind them. Captain Hyo-jin Chai led the final assault against the Void Render weapon platform. Her ship, the Gwangju, was one of the last human vessels still capable of fighting. Half her crew was dead, her engines were failing, and her weapons were nearly depleted. But she had one weapon left, her ship itself. All remaining vessels, this is Captain Che. The planet killer weapon is charging its main cannon. We have maybe 10 minutes before Earth dies. Around her, the surviving human ships began their final attack run. They weren't trying to disable the alien weapon. They were trying to ram it with sufficient force to destroy it completely. The Vexian crews watching this final assault experienced something that would haunt their species for generations. They were witnessing an entire civilization choose mutual destruction rather than surrender. Sir, Kilthera's communications officer called. The planet killer reports that human ships are on collision course. They're not trying to escape. They're trying to destroy the weapon by ramming it. Kilthera watched in stunned silence as damaged, dying human ships accelerated toward the most powerful weapon in the Vexian fleet. These creatures weren't just willing to die for their world. They were willing to take the entire Vexian battle fleet with them. For the first time in his military career, he gave an order he never thought he would speak. All ships begin emergency retreat, immediate withdrawal from the Sol system. Sir? His tactical officer asked in confusion. We still outnumber them significantly. You don't understand, Kilthera replied, watching human ships explode against the Void Render's shields. These creatures will never surrender. They'll keep fighting, until either we're all dead or they're all dead. And I'm not sure which outcome is more likely. The retreat order saved the Void Render weapon platform, but it came too late for many Vexian ships. Human vessels that should have been destroyed hours ago kept fighting, kept ramming, kept exploding, in attacks that served no tactical purpose except to kill as many aliens as possible. As the Vexian fleet pulled back from Earth's orbit, every alien who had participated in the battle understood that they had encountered something unique in the HFY galaxy, a species that viewed extinction as just another tactical option. The final battle for Earth lasted 18 hours and changed the galaxy forever. What remained of the Vexian fleet floated at the edge of the solar system, their commanders trying to understand what had just happened. Commander Kilthera stood on his bridge, staring at the tactical display. His fleet had started with 177 ships. Now he had 83. The humans had begun the battle with 63 vessels and now had fewer than 20 still capable of fighting. By every measure of military logic, the Vexians should have won. But the human ships weren't retreating. Even now, damaged and outnumbered, they were still advancing toward his position. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human admiral." Fleet Admiral Kyung Ho Yu appeared on the main screen. His uniform was torn, his face was covered in blood, and his ship was clearly dying around him. But his eyes still burned with the same determination that had terrified Vexian crews for weeks. "Commander Kilthera," Admiral Yu said in a voice that was perfectly calm despite the chaos visible behind him. "You have 30 minutes to withdraw from our solar system. After that, we will resume our attacks." Kilthera stared at the human admiral in amazement. "You have fewer than 20 ships remaining. We still outnumber you 4-1. "Numbers haven't mattered yet," Admiral Yu replied. "Why would they start mattering now?" Behind the admiral, Kilthera could see human crew members working frantically to repair their weapons while their ship continued to take damage. They were preparing to continue fighting even as their vessel fell apart around them. "You cannot win," Kilthera said, though even as he spoke the words, he wasn't sure he believed them. Admiral Yu smiled, and that expression contained more threat than any weapon Kilthera had ever faced. "Commander, we were never trying to win. We were trying to make sure you lost." The transmission ended, leaving Kilthera alone with a terrible realization. These humans had never been fighting a conventional war. They had been fighting a war of attrition, and their victory condition was simple: make the cost of conquering Earth higher than the Vexians were willing to pay. And they had succeeded. "Sir," his tactical officer spoke quietly, "what are your orders?" Kilthera looked at the display showing the approaching human ships. Even now, even after losing most of their fleet, they were still coming. Still fighting. Still refusing to acknowledge that they should have surrendered hours ago. "Signal the fleet," he said finally. "All ships prepare for hyperspace jump. We are withdrawing from the Sol system." "Sir?" the tactical officer asked in confusion. "Are we retreating?" "No," Kilthera replied. "We are surviving." On Earth, Captain So-Young Kim received the message from Admiral Yu's flagship just before it finally succumbed to its damage. She was now the senior officer of what remained of Earth's fleet. "All ships, the enemy fleet is withdrawing," she broadcast. "We have successfully defended Earth." The cheering that erupted across the human fleet was audible even through the static of damaged communication systems. Against impossible odds, humanity had won its first interstellar war, but the victory came with a cost that would be remembered forever. Of the 63 ships that had begun the final battle, only 12 were still operational. Thousands of humans had died to save their world. Captain Sang-Wook Kim coordinated the rescue operations from Earth's surface. Every surviving human ship was damaged, and many crew members needed immediate medical attention. But they were alive, and Earth was safe. Dr. Changsu Ryu monitored Vexian communications as their fleet prepared to leave the solar system. What he heard amazed him. "Admiral Choi," he reported, "the aliens are issuing what appears to be a fleet-wide psychological evaluation order. They're treating this as a trauma response situation." As the Vexian ships activated their hyperspace drives and vanished from the Sol system, Commander Kilthera composed what would become the most important military report in galactic history. "To the High Command of the Vexian Empire," he began. "The Sol system cannot be conquered by conventional means. The species known as humans possesses military capabilities that exceed our current tactical understanding." He paused, trying to find words for what he had witnessed. "These creatures do not fight like other species. They do not calculate odds or minimize losses. They fight as if death is preferable to defeat, and they become more dangerous as their situation becomes more desperate." Kilthera included detailed tactical analyses, casualty reports, and psychological evaluations of his own crews. But the most important part of his report was the recommendation section. The Sol system should be designated as a no-contact zone. Any future encounters with humans should be avoided. If contact is unavoidable, diplomatic solutions should be prioritized over military action. He concluded with a personal note that would be quoted in Vexian military academies for centuries. Today, I learned the difference between victory and survival. We came to this system as predators. We leave as survivors of an encounter with something that hunts predators. The report was classified at the highest levels, but its contents spread throughout the Vexian military. Word of the Sol system defeat reached other alien civilizations, and the story grew with each telling. Humans, the story said, were the species that fought star-spanning empires with primitive weapons and won through sheer determination. They were the creatures that turned their own deaths into tactical advantages and refused to surrender even when facing planetary extinction. Within a year, the Sol system had become known throughout the local galactic neighborhood as a place to avoid. Trade routes were rerouted around human space. Exploration missions were directed away from Earth's region. Captain So Young Kim, now promoted to admiral and commanding the rebuilt Earth Defense Fleet, received a priority transmission from deep space. The message was in dozens of different alien languages, but the content was the same. "This is the Galactic Trade Consortium," the message began. "We represent 47 member species and wish to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity. Admiral." Kim smiled as she read the rest of the message. The aliens weren't asking for surrender or offering to conquer Earth. They were requesting permission to visit and offering trade agreements. The final entry in Commander Kilthera's personal log read, "The humans taught us something we had forgotten in our centuries of easy conquest. There are fates worse than death, and sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when not to fight. We thought we were the apex predators of this galaxy. We were wrong. Somewhere in a small yellow star system, there lives a species that makes apex predators check their doors at night. Their message to us was simple: try diplomacy first." 6 months after the war ended, Earth received its first alien visitors. They came in unarmed ships flying under diplomatic flags, requesting permission to land. The age of human isolation was over. The age of human respect had begun. And throughout the galaxy, when young aliens asked their elders about the strange species from Sol 3, the answer was always the same. Those are humans. They're the ones who taught the universe what real strength looks like.